At 78 years old, I thought I'd seen everything life could throw at me. 2 tours in Vietnam, 35 years as a machinist at Ford, burying my dear Martha 5 years ago, and watching my children grow into adults with their own complicated lives. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what started with a simple bottle of wine. It arrived on a Tuesday, which should have been my first clue that something was off. Michael, my eldest son, never did anything on Tuesdays. Mondays were for recovering from whatever weekend chaos his wife Rebecca had dragged him through. Wednesdays were for midweek crisis calls about money or marriage. But Tuesdays? Tuesdays were sacred in the Anderson household, the day Michael actually focused on his real estate business instead of whatever drama was consuming his life. The delivery man looked nervous, checking his clipboard 3 times before handing over the elegant wooden box. "Franklin Anderson?" he asked, though my name was clearly painted on the mailbox Martha had insisted we install the year before she passed. Good old Martha. She always said attention to detail would save your life someday. If only she'd known how right she'd be. Inside the box, nestled in burgundy velvet like a sleeping baby, lay a bottle of 1982 Bordeaux. Chateau Latour. Even my untrained eye could tell this wasn't something you picked up at the corner liquor store. The label was pristine, the glass thick and dark, promising secrets aged in French cellars for 4 decades. A small card was tucked beside it, written in Michael's familiar scrawl. "Happy 78th, Dad. You deserve the best. Love, Michael." I turned the bottle in my weathered hands, feeling its weight, its importance. This wasn't just wine, this was an apology wrapped in 40 years of fermentation. Michael had been distant lately, ever since Rebecca's father, Harold Zimmerman, had moved in with them 6 months ago. Harold, with his silver tongue and expensive suits, his stories of success in import-export, that never quite made sense, his way of making everyone in the room feel slightly uncomfortable without quite knowing why. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here was Michael, trying to bridge whatever gap had grown between us, using a bottle that probably cost more than I spent on groceries in 3 months. But that's Michael, grand gestures instead of simple conversations, expensive solutions to emotional problems. I set the bottle on my kitchen counter, next to the pills that keep my heart beating and the coffee mug Martha painted in that pottery class she took the year before the cancer. The wine looked out of place among my simple things, like a thoroughbred in a stable full of workhorses. That evening, I called my daughter Sarah in Portland. "Your brother sent me wine," I told her, still staring at the bottle. "Wine?" Sarah laughed, but there was an edge to it. "Michael doesn't know a Chablis from a Chianti. What's the occasion?" "My birthday, apparently." A pause. Sarah had forgotten too, but she was too kind to admit it. "Well, that's thoughtful of him. Expensive?" "Probably." "Then you better save it for something special, Dad. Don't go drinking it with Harold Zimmerman again." Harold Zimmerman. Even Sarah, 3,000 miles away, knew about Harold. The man had a way of insinuating himself into conversations, into family dynamics, into places he didn't belong. But Rebecca adored her father, and what Rebecca wanted, Michael provided. It had always been that way, even when they were dating in college. Michael, desperate to please, to be accepted, to prove he was worthy of the beautiful girl from the wealthy family. After hanging up with Sarah, I sat in Martha's old recliner and stared at the wine. The house felt too quiet, too empty. The grandfather clock in the hallway, Martha's pride and joy, ticked away the seconds with mechanical precision. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Time passing, always passing, carrying us toward whatever comes next. I thought about calling Michael to thank him, but something held me back. Maybe it was the way he'd been acting lately, distracted and nervous whenever Harold was around. Maybe it was the feeling that this gift came with strings attached, expectations I couldn't see but could sense hovering in the shadows. Or maybe I was just a paranoid old man reading too much into a son's gesture of love. Outside, November wind rattled the windows Martha had insisted we double pane. "For the energy bills, Frank," She'd said, always practical, always thinking ahead. I missed her practicality almost as much as I missed her laugh. She would have known what to do with this wine, this gift, this growing unease that settled in my chest like smoke. The bottle sat on the counter all night, catching moonlight through the kitchen window. Waiting. The next morning brought Harold Zimmerman to my door like a bad omen dressed in cashmere. He stood on my front porch at exactly 9:30 a.m., not early enough to be rude, not late enough to be casual, holding a manila envelope and wearing that smile that never quite reached his eyes. "Franklin," he said, extending his hand. His grip was firm, calculated, the handshake of a man who'd learned long ago that first impressions matter. "I hope you don't mind the unannounced visit. I was in the neighborhood." Harold was never just. In the neighborhood. My neighborhood was a collection of modest post-war homes filled with retirees, widows, and young families scraping by. It wasn't the kind of place where men in $1,000 coats just happened to find themselves. But I'd learned over the past 6 months that Harold's version of truth was more flexible than most people's. "Coffee?" I offered, because Martha had raised me to be polite, even to people who made my skin crawl. "That would be wonderful." I led him into the kitchen, where the Bordeaux still sat on the counter like evidence of something I couldn't quite name. Harold noticed it immediately. His eyes sharpened, focused, catalogued its value in the time it took me to open the coffee canister. My, he said, moving closer to examine the bottle. Chateau Latour 82. Someone has excellent taste. He picked it up with the reverence of a priest handling holy relics. "This is worth at least $3,000, Franklin. Maybe more, depending on provenance and storage conditions." $3,000. I kept my expression neutral, but inside, something cold slithered down my spine. Michael, who called me last month asking for a loan to fix his transmission, had sent me a $3,000 bottle of wine? "Gift from my son," I said, measuring coffee with hands steadier than I felt. "Michael." Harold set the bottle down carefully. "Yes, he mentioned he'd sent you something special. Such a thoughtful boy. Rebecca and I are very fortunate to have him as part of the family." The way he said it made it sound like Michael had married into royalty instead of a middle-class family from Detroit. But that was Harold's way. Everything was either beneath him or a reflection of his own superiority. "What brings you by, Harold?" He sat at my kitchen table, the manila envelope placed precisely beside his coffee cup. "I wanted to discuss something with you, Franklin. A business opportunity that could benefit us both." "Here it comes," I thought. Harold had been circling around some kind of proposition for weeks, dropping hints during Sunday dinners, making casual references to investments and mutual benefits. Michael had grown increasingly tense whenever these conversations started, but he never intervened. He just sat there, jaw tight, while his father-in-law painted pictures of easy money and shared prosperity. "I'm retired, Harold. Been out of the business world for 15 years. But you still have assets, Franklin. This house, Martha's life insurance settlement, your pension, Social Security. Money sitting in banks earning practically nothing while inflation eats away at its value." He leaned forward, his voice taking on that conspiratorial tone salesmen use when they want you to feel like you're getting insider information. "I have connections in the import business. Legitimate, profitable, completely legal. But I need investors, silent partners who understand the value of discretion." I poured coffee, letting the silence stretch. Outside, Mrs. Patterson from next door was walking her ancient beagle, the same route she'd taken every morning for the 20 years I'd known her. Some things never changed. Other things changed too fast, too completely, leaving you stumbling to catch up. "What kind of imports?" "Art, primarily. European pieces, estate sales, private collections. The kind of items that appreciate rapidly if you know what you're looking for and have the right connections." Harold opened the envelope and slid out a photograph of an ornate vase, clearly expensive, definitely old. "This piece, for example. I acquired it last month for $8,000. It sold 3 weeks later for $22,000. Sounds too good to be true. Harold laughed, but it was the kind of laugh that made you check your wallet afterward. I understand your skepticism, Franklin. In your generation, men worked hard for their money, saved it carefully, invested conservatively. But the world has changed. Opportunities exist now that didn't exist when you were building your career. The key is knowing how to recognize them. I studied the photograph. The vase was beautiful, the kind of thing Martha would have admired in a museum but never dreamed of owning. Too elegant for our simple life, too expensive for our practical dreams. Why me, Harold? Because your family, Franklin. Because Michael speaks so highly of your judgment and integrity. Because sometimes the best investments are built on trust rather than contracts. He slid the photograph back into the envelope. Think about it. No pressure, no rush. Just consider the possibilities. After he left, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, staring at the wine bottle and thinking about possibilities. $3,000 worth of wine from a son who borrowed money for car repairs. Business opportunities from a man who never clearly explained how he made his living. Trust built on family connections that felt more like spider webs every day. The phone rang at exactly noon. Dad? Michael's voice carried that particular tension I'd learned to recognize over the past few months. The sound of a man walking on eggshells in his own life. How are you doing? Fine, son. Your father-in-law just left. A pause. In that silence I heard volumes. Anxiety, frustration, maybe fear. Michael had never been good at hiding his emotions, not even as a child. When he broke Martha's favorite lamp at age 7, he'd confess before we'd even noticed it was missing. Harold was there? What did he want? To talk about business opportunities. Importing art, he said. I kept my voice neutral, waiting to see how much Michael knew, how deep he was in whatever Harold was planning. Jesus. Michael's voice dropped to almost a whisper. Dad, listen to me carefully. Don't get involved with Harold's business. Whatever he told you, whatever he offered, just don't. Why? Another pause, longer this time. I could hear Rebecca in the background, her voice sharp with questions Michael couldn't or wouldn't answer. The sound of a door closing. Michael moving somewhere he could talk privately. I can't explain everything right now, but Harold's businesses aren't what they seem. The art importing, the estate sales, the connections he talks about, it's more complicated than he makes it sound. Complicated how? Dad, please. Just trust me on this. Stay away from Harold's offers, don't give him money, don't sign anything. Can you promise me that? I thought about the wine bottle, about Harold's casual assessment of its value, about Michael's increasingly desperate tone. Son, that wine you sent me. That was expensive. What? The shift in his voice was immediate, sharp. What wine? My blood chilled. The Bordeaux. For my birthday. Chateau Latour 1982. Dad, I didn't send you any wine. The words hit me like a physical blow. I sank into Martha's recliner, the phone suddenly heavy in my hand. The card. It had your name on it. I didn't send you any wine. Michael repeated, his voice rising with panic. Dad, are you sure it was addressed to you? Are you sure it was from me? The delivery man asked for Franklin Anderson. The card said it was from you. Oh God. Michael's breathing became rapid, shallow. Dad, don't drink that wine. Don't open it, don't touch it, don't let Harold near it. I'm coming over right now. Michael, what's going on? 20 minutes, Dad? I'll be there in 20 minutes. And Dad? Lock the doors. The line went dead. I sat holding the phone, staring at the wine bottle on the counter, my mind racing through possibilities I didn't want to consider. If Michael didn't send the wine, who did? And why use his name? Why choose a bottle expensive enough to catch Harold's attention? I thought about Harold's visit, how his eyes had locked onto the wine immediately, how he'd handled it with such familiarity, such reverence. How he'd known its exact value without hesitation, as if he'd researched it beforehand. Or as if he'd selected it himself. The house felt different now, charged with menace I couldn't define. Every shadow seemed deeper, every sound sharper. The grandfather clock's ticking had become a countdown, though to what, I couldn't guess. I walked to the kitchen window and looked out at the street. Mrs. Patterson was gone. Her beagle walked and fed. The neighborhood was settling into its midday quiet, children at school, adults at work, retirees napping or watching game shows. Normal life continuing while my world tilted sideways. The wine bottle seemed to pulse with malevolent energy, a beautiful trap sitting on my counter. But a trap for whom? Me? Michael? Or was it bait for something larger, something that involved Harold's mysterious business and my son's growing desperation? I thought about Martha, about how she'd always been the one to see danger coming. "Frank," she'd say, "when something seems too good to be true, it usually is. And when someone starts talking about easy money, they're usually talking about your money becoming easy for them to take." 20 minutes felt like 20 hours. I locked the front door, then the back door, then checked them both again. I moved the wine bottle to the dining room, away from the windows, though I couldn't say why that felt safer. Then I moved it back to the kitchen, thinking it was better to keep it where I could watch it. By the time Michael's car pulled into my driveway, I'd relocated that damned bottle 4 times and worn a path in Martha's kitchen linoleum. My hands were shaking, age, maybe, or coffee, or the growing certainty that whatever was happening was bigger and more dangerous than an old man's birthday gift. Michael burst through the front door like a man fleeing a fire. His face was pale, his clothes disheveled, and his eyes held a wildness I'd never seen before. This wasn't my successful real estate agent's son. This was a man who'd seen something terrible and knew it was coming for him. "Where is it?" he demanded. I led him to the kitchen. He stared at the wine bottle like it was a bomb, which, I was beginning to think, it might as well have been. "Dad," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "we're in serious trouble." "Sit down, Dad." Michael pulled out one of Martha's kitchen chairs, his hands trembling as he gripped the back of it. "What I'm about to tell you is going to sound insane, but I need you to listen to everything before you ask questions." I sat, my heart hammering against my ribs like a caged bird. At 78, I thought I was past the age of earth-shattering revelations, but Michael's expression told me I was wrong. "Harold isn't just Rebecca's father," Michael began, pacing between the kitchen counter and the table. "I mean, he is, but that's not why he moved in with us. He's hiding from people, Dad. Dangerous people." "What kind of people?" "The kind who don't send collection notices when you owe them money. The kind who send messages." He gestured toward the wine bottle. "The kind who know where you live, where your family lives, and exactly how to get your attention." I felt the blood drain from my face. "That wine is a message. Harold's been involved in art fraud for 20 years. Not just buying and selling, creating fake provenance, forging documents, moving stolen pieces through legitimate auction houses. He made millions, Dad. Millions. But 6 months ago, something went wrong." Michael stopped pacing and leaned against the counter, his shoulders sagging under invisible weight. A painting he'd been commissioned to move turned out to be more than just stolen. It was taken from a Jewish family during World War II. The family's grandson is a federal prosecutor now, and when he traced the painting back to Harold, everything unraveled. So Harold's running from the law? Harold's running from everyone. The FBI has been building a case against his entire network for 2 years. The people he worked with don't trust him to stay quiet if he's arrested. And the families who lost art to the Nazis? Michael's voice cracked. They've been waiting 80 years for justice, Dad. Some of them have given up on the legal system. I stared at the wine bottle, beginning to understand. So who sent this? I don't know yet. Could be the FBI, trying to flush Harold out of hiding. Could be his former associates, letting him know they haven't forgotten about him. Could be someone representing the families whose art he's been trafficking. Michael ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I remembered from his childhood when he was overwhelmed. But whoever it is, they know Harold's been staying with us. They know he'd recognize an expensive wine. They know he'd be curious enough to investigate. The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. Harold came here this morning because he saw the wine. He wanted to know where it came from. And what did you tell him? That it was from you. A birthday gift. Michael's face went white. Oh, Jesus. Dad, do you understand what that means? Whoever sent this now thinks I'm involved. They think I'm part of Harold's network. I thought about Harold's visit, his casual examination of the wine, his business proposition. Had he been testing me? Trying to determine how much I knew? Or had he genuinely believed the wine was from Michael, evidence that his son-in-law was deeper in the business than Harold realized? There's more, Michael said, and I couldn't imagine how there could possibly be more. Rebecca doesn't know the truth about her father. She thinks he's a successful art dealer who got caught up in some bureaucratic trouble with customs. She has no idea about the Nazi art, the fraud, the people who want him dead. You haven't told your own wife? How do I tell her that her father is a criminal? That our house might be under surveillance? That every day he stays with us puts our family in danger? Michael's voice rose with desperation. Rebecca's pregnant, Dad. We just found out last week. She's carrying my child, and I can't protect her because I can't tell her what we're protecting her from. Pregnant. My granddaughter-in-law was carrying my great-grandchild while living under the same roof as a man who'd spent decades trafficking stolen art. The weight of it pressed down on me like a physical force. What do you want me to do? I need you to call Harold. Tell him you've been thinking about his business proposition. Tell him you want to meet with him here, tonight, to discuss details. Can you do that? Michael, I don't understand. Dad, please. I have a plan, but I need Harold away from Rebecca. If we're going to end this, if we're going to protect our family, we have to make Harold think he's finally got the investor he's been looking for. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw the man he'd become under pressure. Not the eager-to-please boy who married above his station, not the struggling real estate agent who borrowed money for car repairs. This was a father preparing to fight for his family, willing to risk everything to protect the people he loved. What about the wine? What do we do with it? We're going to give it to Harold, just like you told him. But first, we're going to find out exactly who sent it, and what message they're trying to deliver. Michael pulled out his phone and dialed a number I didn't recognize. Jerry? It's Michael Anderson. I need that favor we talked about. No, it can't wait. Bring your kit. I'll explain when you get here. After he hung up, I asked the question that had been gnawing at me since this conversation started. Son, how do you know all this about Harold? How long have you known what he really is? Michael sat down across from me, and for the first time since he'd arrived, he looked directly into my eyes. Since the day he moved in with us. He told me everything, Dad. He said he needed somewhere safe to hide, and in exchange, he'd cut me in on one last deal. Enough money to buy Rebecca the house she's always wanted, to give our child the kind of life I never had. And you believed him? I wanted to believe him. God help me, I wanted to believe that for once in my life, something would come easy. That I could provide for my family without scraping and struggling and borrowing money from my father for car repairs. Tears gathered in Michael's eyes. But the deeper I got, the more I realized Harold wasn't offering me an opportunity. He was making me an accomplice. Jerry Kowalski arrived 40 minutes later, carrying a battered leather briefcase and wearing the kind of clothes that made him invisible in any crowd. Medium height, medium build, brown hair going gray, the face of a man who'd learned long ago that being memorable was usually bad for business. I'd known Jerry since his father and I worked together at Ford, but I'd never known exactly what Jerry did for a living. Security consultant, he'd always said when asked, which could mean anything from mall cop to CIA operative. Looking at him now, examining the wine bottle with professional intensity, I suspected it was closer to the latter. Interesting piece, Jerry murmured, pulling a small ultraviolet light from his briefcase. Mind if I work in a darker room? We moved to the dining room, where Jerry drew the curtains and began his examination. Under the UV light, marks appeared on the wine label that were invisible to the naked eye. Tiny symbols, numbers, what looked like coordinates. Definitely a message, Jerry confirmed, photographing the hidden marks with a specialized camera. Professional grade invisible ink, probably applied with a micro brush. Whoever did this has serious resources. Can you read it? Michael asked. Jerry pulled out a magnifying glass and studied the photographs on his camera's display. It's not a standard code. Looks like map coordinates, maybe? And this symbol here. He pointed to a small mark near the bottom of the label. I've seen this before. Where? Art recovery. There's a group that specializes in tracking down Nazi-looted art. They use this symbol as a signature on their intelligence reports. Jerry looked up at us, his expression grim. Gentlemen, whoever sent this wine isn't playing games. This is serious international art recovery work. Art recovery, I repeated. You mean like treasure hunters? More like justice seekers. Some of them are professional investigators, some are descendants of Holocaust victims, some are just people who believe stolen art should be returned to its rightful owners. But they're not bound by the same rules as law enforcement. They're not limited by jurisdictional boundaries or legal procedures. Michael sank into Martha's good chair, the one she'd only let us use for company. So they're vigilantes. Some of them. Others work within the law but outside official channels. The point is, they've identified your father-in-law as someone involved in trafficking Nazi-looted art, and they're sending a message that they know where to find him. Jerry pulled out his phone and began typing. I'm sending these coordinates to a contact who specializes in this stuff. Give me 20 minutes, and I should be able to tell you exactly what they're pointing to. While we waited, I made coffee and tried to process what my quiet retirement had become. Yesterday, my biggest worry was whether to have the oak tree in the backyard trimmed before winter. Now I was harboring a fugitive art thief, my son was involved in international crime, and my kitchen table had become command central for what felt like a spy operation. Dad, Michael said quietly, I know this is a lot to ask, but I need to know you're with me on this. Whatever we have to do to protect Rebecca and the baby, to end this nightmare, I need to know you're with me. I thought about Martha, about the values she tried to instill in our children. Honesty, integrity, standing up for what's right even when it's difficult. She would have hated what Harold represented, the casual cruelty of profiting from other people's suffering, the arrogance of treating stolen history like personal property. I'm with you, son. But we do this right. No one gets hurt if we can help it, and when it's over, Harold faces justice through the proper channels. Michael nodded, relief flooding his face. I was hoping you'd say that. Jerry's phone buzzed. He read the message, then looked up at us with an expression I couldn't quite read. The coordinates point to a storage facility in Detroit. Unit 247. And according to my contact, that unit is registered under the name Franklin Anderson. The room went silent except for the grandfather clock's relentless ticking. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. That's impossible. I don't have any storage unit. Someone's using your identity, Mr. Anderson. The question is why. Jerry packed up his equipment with practiced efficiency. My contact says the art recovery people have been watching that unit for 3 months. Whatever's in there, it's important enough to risk exposing their investigation. Harold, Michael said. He's been using Dad's name as cover. If anyone traced the storage unit back, they'd find a retired machinist, not an art dealer. Smart, Jerry admitted grudgingly. Your father-in-law is more sophisticated than I gave him credit for. But also more reckless. Using a family member's identity creates liability for everyone involved. My hands were shaking again, but this time it wasn't fear. It was anger. Harold had dragged me into his criminal enterprise without my knowledge, used my name, my reputation, my identity as a shield for his illegal activities. Worse, he'd put my entire family at risk. "What's in the storage unit?" I asked. "According to my contact, probably art. High-value pieces with questionable provenance. But here's the thing, the art recovery people aren't the only ones watching that unit. FBI surveillance detected at least 2 other parties conducting their own surveillance." "Harold's former associates," Michael said. "Most likely. Which means that storage unit is going to become a very dangerous place very soon. Everyone involved wants what's inside, and they're all running out of patience." Jerry stood to leave, then paused at the door. "One more thing. My contact says the art recovery people are planning to move on that storage unit within 48 hours. If you're going to resolve this situation, you need to do it fast." After Jerry left, Michael and I sat in the growing darkness of my dining room, staring at the wine bottle that had started this avalanche. Outside, the neighborhood was settling into its evening routine, porch lights coming on, the smell of dinner cooking, the sound of children being called in from play. Normal life, the kind of life I'd thought I was living until this morning. "So what's the plan?" I asked. Michael took a deep breath. "We're going to give Harold exactly what he wants. We're going to make him believe he's finally found the perfect partner for his art business. And then we're going to use that partnership to lead him straight into the hands of the people who've been looking for him. And if something goes wrong? Then we pray, Dad. We pray and we fight and we do whatever it takes to protect our family." Harold arrived at 7:30 sharp, dressed for success in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my monthly pension. He carried a leather portfolio and wore the confident smile of a man who believed he was about to close an important deal. If he suspected anything unusual about the hastily arranged meeting, he didn't show it. "Franklin," he said, settling into Martha's chair like he belonged there. "I'm so pleased you decided to move forward with this opportunity. I had a feeling you were a man who understood the value of decisive action." I poured 3 glasses of bourbon, the cheap stuff I kept for occasions when I needed liquid courage. Michael wanted to be here for this conversation. He's the one with the head for business in this family. Michael nodded from his position by the window, where he could watch the street for unexpected visitors. "Rebecca thinks I'm at a client meeting. I told her I might be late." "Excellent." Harold opened his portfolio and spread several photographs across my kitchen table. "I thought you might like to see examples of the pieces we'll be working with. This is a small sampling of the inventory I have available for immediate investment." The photographs showed paintings, sculptures, ornate furniture, all clearly valuable, all bearing the kind of elaborate frames and detailed craftsmanship that screamed expensive European antiques. I recognized none of them, but then again, my art education consisted mainly of the landscapes Martha had hung in our living room. "Beautiful pieces," I said, trying to sound appropriately impressed. "What kind of return are we talking about? Conservative estimate? 50% within 6 months. But some pieces, especially those with interesting historical connections, can return 2, 3, even 500%. Harold pulled out a photograph of an ornate mirror with a gilt frame. "This piece, for example. 17th century, French court provenance. I acquired it for $12,000. It sold at auction last month for $68,000. Michael moved closer to the table. "What makes you so sure about the valuations?" "Experience, my boy. 30 years in this business teaches you to recognize quality, to understand market trends, to spot pieces that are undervalued by their current owners." Harold's eyes gleamed with the fervor of a true believer. "The secret is knowing where to look and having the contacts to authenticate pieces quickly and discreetly." "Discreetly?" I repeated. "The art world values privacy, Franklin. Collectors, dealers, auction houses, they all prefer to conduct business away from public scrutiny. Too much attention drives up prices, attracts competition, brings in regulators who don't understand the nuances of our industry. Industry. Harold spoke about art theft like it was manufacturing or retail, just another way to make a living. The casual arrogance of it made my stomach turn, but I kept my expression neutral. What would you need from me? Initial investment of $50,000. Cash, naturally. Art transactions work better without the complications of bank transfers and credit checks. I handle all the acquisition, authentication, and resale. You receive your initial investment plus 50% of the profits. $50,000. I had that much in Martha's life insurance money I'd been saving for emergencies or maybe a trip to see Sarah in Portland. Money that represented Martha's careful budgeting, her sacrifice, her belief that we should leave something behind for our children. That's a substantial amount, I said. For substantial returns. But I understand your caution, Franklin. Perhaps we should start smaller, let you see how the process works before committing to a full partnership. Harold pulled out another photograph, this one showing a small painting of a harbor scene. This piece is available for immediate purchase. Investment of $8,000, probable return of $20,000 to $25,000 within 90 days. Michael leaned over my shoulder, studying the painting. It's beautiful. What's the history? Estate sale in Montreal. Elderly collector, no heirs, everything being liquidated quickly. The family just wants to convert everything to cash for charity donations. They're not particularly interested in maximum value, just quick, clean transactions. Sounds too good to be true, I said, echoing Martha's favorite warning. Harold's smile never wavered. I understand your skepticism, Franklin. In your generation, men built wealth slowly, carefully, through hard work and conservative investments. But the art market operates on different principles. Information, connections, timing, these are the tools of modern wealth creation. He stood and began packing up his photographs. Think about it. Discuss it with Michael. But don't think too long. Opportunities like this don't wait for indecision. After Harold left, Michael and I sat in my kitchen, staring at the empty bourbon glasses and trying to process what we just heard. Harold's pitch was smooth, professional, convincing, and almost certainly built on a foundation of stolen art and forged documents. Did you notice how he never mentioned where the pieces come from originally? Michael asked. Estate sales, private collections, liquidations, but never a specific museum, never a named previous owner, never a clear chain of custody. And the returns he's promising are impossible in any legitimate business. Dad, I think Harold's not just hiding from the people he's crossed. I think he's still actively working, still moving stolen art, still building the network that's going to eventually destroy him. Michael pulled out his phone. I'm calling Jerry. We need to move on this tomorrow. What about Rebecca? Michael's face tightened with pain. I'm going to have to tell her. Tonight when I get home. She deserves to know what we're dealing with. And she deserves to choose whether she wants to be part of the solution or get as far away from her father as possible. And if she chooses her father? Then I choose my child. Our child. Someone has to protect the innocent people in this mess, Dad. Even if it means protecting them from their own family. The call came at 2:17 a.m., jarring me from dreams of Martha and simpler times. Michael's voice was raw with exhaustion and something darker. Defeat, maybe, or the kind of despair that comes from watching your life collapse in real time. Dad, I need you to come over. Now. Bring the wine. What happened? Rebecca knows. Everything. And Dad, she's gone. I threw on clothes and drove through empty streets to Michael's house, a modest colonial in a subdivision that had been built during the optimistic 1990s. When young families believed hard work and good intentions were enough to guarantee happiness. The American dream made manifest in vinyl siding and two-car garages. Michael met me at the door, his face haggard, his clothes wrinkled from a night of crisis. She left an hour ago. Took her car, some clothes, and her father. Where did they go? I don't know. She won't answer her phone, and Harold's car is gone too. Michael led me into the living room, where evidence of a violent argument was scattered across the coffee table. Tissues, an overturned glass, a pregnancy test that confirmed what Michael had told me earlier. Tell me what happened. Michael collapsed onto the couch, his head in his hands. I told her everything. About Harold's real business, about the Nazi art, about the people who are hunting him. I thought, God, I was so stupid, I thought she'd understand. I thought she'd want to protect our child. And instead? She accused me of lying. Said I was jealous of her father's success, that I was making up stories to destroy her family. She said I was just like my father, always expecting the worst from people, always suspicious, always ready to believe that good things can't be real. The comparison stung, partly because there was truth in it. I had raised Michael to be cautious, to question easy answers, to work for what he wanted instead of trusting in luck or other people's generosity. Martha used to say I was too cynical, too quick to assume the worst about human nature. Maybe she was in shock. People don't always react rationally when their world gets turned upside down. No, Dad. You didn't see her face. She wasn't in shock, she was protecting him. Even after I showed her the evidence Jerry found, even after I explained about the storage unit and the coordinates, she chose to believe Harold over her own husband. I sat beside my son, feeling every one of my 78 years. What did Harold say during all this? That's the worst part. He didn't deny anything. When Rebecca confronted him, when she demanded the truth, he just looked at her with this sad, resigned expression and said, "I'm sorry, Princess. I never wanted you to know." Princess. Harold's pet name for Rebecca, the one that had always made Michael wince with its implications of indulgence and privilege. Even in confession, Harold was positioning himself as the tragic figure, the loving father who'd sacrificed his principles to provide for his daughter. So he admitted it? He admitted he'd made some mistakes, gotten involved with the wrong people, maybe bent some rules. But he made it sound like he was the victim, like he was being persecuted for trying to make a living in a complicated business. Michael's voice rose with frustration. And Rebecca believed him. She's choosing to believe that her father is just a businessman who got caught up in some bureaucratic misunderstanding rather than face the truth about what he really is. I thought about the wine bottle in my car, about the storage unit registered in my name, about the dangerous people who were converging on Harold's location. Son, we can't let them disappear. If Harold's still moving art, if he's still active, then he's going to lead those people straight to Rebecca. I know. But I don't know where they went. Harold's too smart to go to a hotel or use credit cards. He's probably got safe houses, backup identities, escape routes we can't imagine. My phone buzzed with a text message from a number I didn't recognize. Storage Unit 247. Midnight tomorrow. Come alone, or the pregnant girl pays for her father's crimes. I showed the message to Michael, watching the color drain from his face. They have Rebecca. Or they know where to find her. I stood up, my mind racing through possibilities. Michael, called Jerry. Tell him we need to meet at the storage facility tonight, not tomorrow. Tell him to bring whatever backup he can arrange. Dad, what are you thinking? I'm thinking Harold's been one step ahead of everyone because he's been using our family as cover. But now that Rebecca's with him, he's not hiding anymore, he's making a stand. And that storage unit is where he's going to make it. We drove separately to the storage facility, a sprawling complex of metal buildings and security lights on Detroit's east side. The kind of place where people kept the overflow from their lives, Christmas decorations, old furniture, boxes of memories they couldn't bear to throw away but didn't have room to keep. Jerry was waiting for us in the parking lot, along with two other men I didn't recognize. They all wore dark clothing and had the alert, competent look of people who'd spent time in dangerous places. Federal agents? Michael asked. Art recovery specialists, Jerry corrected. International team. They've been tracking Harold's network for 2 years. The older of the two men stepped forward, extending his hand. David Rosen, he said with a slight accent that might have been German. My grandmother lost 14 paintings when the Nazis seized her gallery in Berlin. I've spent the last 30 years getting them back. How many have you recovered? I asked. 11. 3 are in storage unit 247. The weight of that hit me like a physical blow. Harold wasn't just trafficking stolen art, he was trafficking pieces stolen from Holocaust victims, profiting from some of the darkest chapters in human history. What's the plan? Michael asked. Harold's inside, the second man said. Been there for 3 hours. No sign of the woman, but we've detected at least 2 other surveillance teams in the area. His former associates? Most likely. They're probably waiting to see who else shows up before they make their move. David Rosen pulled out a tablet showing thermal imaging of the storage facility. Harold's not alone in there. 2 other heat signatures, one significantly smaller than the others. Rebecca. Michael breathed. And one more person. Could be insurance, could be a negotiator, could be someone Harold trusts to help him disappear permanently. I stared at the tablet, at the small heat signature that represented my daughter-in-law and unborn grandchild. Rebecca, who'd chosen to believe in her father's lies rather than face an ugly truth. Rebecca, who was about to learn that some choices have consequences that extend far beyond the people who make them. We go in together, I said. Harold's been using my name, my identity. This ends with me. Unit 247 sat in the back corner of the facility, surrounded by shadows and the ambient hum of security equipment. The roll-up door was closed, but light leaked around the edges, and I could hear voices inside, Harold's measured tones, Rebecca's higher pitch, and a third voice I didn't recognize. David Rosen produced a set of lock picks and had the door open in 30 seconds. We rolled it up just enough to slip inside, then closed it behind us. The storage unit was larger than I'd expected, maybe 20 by 30 feet, and packed with artwork in various stages of packaging. Paintings leaned against the walls in protective wrapping, sculptures sat on wooden pallets, and boxes labeled with international shipping codes were stacked near the back. Harold stood in the center of it all like a king surveying his treasury. He changed from his expensive suit into jeans and a sweater, practical clothes for a man preparing to disappear. Rebecca sat on a folding chair nearby, her face pale but defiant. The third person was a woman I'd never seen before, middle-aged, sharp-featured, wearing the kind of clothes that suggested serious money and serious connections. Franklin, Harold said, showing no surprise at our arrival. I wondered when you'd turn up. And Michael, I'm sorry it came to this, son. Let Rebecca go, Michael said. This is between you and the people you've stolen from. Stolen. Harold shook his head sadly. Such a harsh word for such complicated transactions. The art world has been redistributing masterpieces for centuries, Michael. Collectors die, estates are liquidated, pieces find new homes with people who can appreciate them properly. Nazi-looted art isn't redistribution. David Rosen stepped into the light. It's trafficking and genocide. Harold's expression hardened when he saw David. Mr. Rosen? I wondered when you'd surface. Still chasing ghosts from your grandmother's past? Still recovering stolen property from thieves like you? David moved closer to one of the wrapped paintings. This Degas pastel, for instance. Stolen from the Rosenbaum family in Vienna, 1943. They've been looking for it for 80 years. The Rosenbaums are dead, Harold said coldly. All of them. The art survives because people like me preserve it, protect it, ensure it finds homes where it can be properly maintained and appreciated. By people who can afford to pay you millions for stolen property. Rebecca stood up from her chair, her hand protectively over her stomach. Stop it. All of you, just stop. I don't care about old paintings or dead families or any of this. I care about my child, and I care about my father, and I want all of you to leave us alone. The woman who'd been standing silently in the corner finally spoke. I'm afraid that's not possible, dear. Her voice carried the crisp authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Your father has information that belongs to my clients. Information they're willing to pay very well to recover. Who are you? I asked. Catherine Volkov. I represent certain private collectors who have found themselves on the wrong side of recent federal investigations. They're very interested in ensuring that Harold's cooperation with law enforcement remains limited. Harold laughed bitterly. Cooperation? Catherine, I've spent 6 months running from federal agents, art recovery vigilantes, and now your client's hired muscle. The last thing I'm interested in is cooperation with anyone. Which is why we're here, Catherine said. To offer you a final alternative to cooperation. She reached into her purse, too casually, too confidently, and I saw Jerry tense beside me. The 2 men he'd brought shifted position, creating clear lines of fire while keeping Rebecca out of the potential crossfire. Harold, I said quietly, this ends now. You can walk out of here with us, turn yourself into the proper authorities, face justice through the legal system. Or you can try to run again and put your daughter and grandchild in more danger. Justice. Harold spat the word like it tasted bitter. Franklin, do you know what justice looks like in the art world? 30 years in federal prison for facilitating transactions that happen every day in auction houses from New York to London. Prison time while the real power brokers, the collectors, the auction houses, the museums that ask no questions about provenance, continue business as usual. So you justify theft by pointing to other thieves? I justify survival by understanding how the world really works. The art in this unit is worth $40 million, Franklin. 40 million. Enough to set Rebecca up for life, to ensure my grandchild never wants for anything, to buy the kind of security that keeps families safe from people like Catherine's clients. Rebecca moved to her father's side, taking his arm. Dad's right. We can disappear, start over somewhere safe. The 3 of us, you, me, and the baby. A new life, a clean slate. Michael stepped toward his wife, his face a mask of pain. Rebecca, listen to yourself. You're talking about running for the rest of your life. About raising our child as a fugitive, always looking over your shoulder, never trusting anyone, never having a real home. Better than raising our child without a father because you turned him in to people who want to destroy him. The accusation hung in the air like poison gas. Rebecca had drawn her line in the sand, family loyalty over justice, love over law, the bonds of blood over the bonds of marriage. Catherine Volkov cleared her throat delicately. I hate to interrupt this touching family reunion, but my clients are expecting results tonight. Harold, you have 2 choices. Come with me now and accept their very generous offer of permanent relocation, or stay here and deal with the federal agents who will arrive shortly. What about Rebecca? Harold asked. Your daughter is free to make her own choices. My clients have no interest in pregnant women or babies. But if she chooses to stay with you, she'll be choosing to share whatever consequences follow. I looked around the storage unit, at the stolen artwork that represented decades of crime, at my family torn apart by greed and fear, at the dangerous people who'd been circling like vultures. All of this because Harold had convinced himself that theft was just another form of business, that victims were just inconvenient complications in profitable transactions. There's a third choice, I said. Everyone turned to look at me, Harold with curiosity, Rebecca with hope, Michael with concern, and Catherine Volkov with the sharp attention of a predator sensing new prey. Franklin, Harold said carefully, what are you thinking? I'm thinking about that wine bottle. About the message hidden in the label. About coordinates that led to this storage unit and the people who've been watching it. I moved toward the center of the unit, positioning myself between Harold and Catherine's reach. I'm thinking someone's been very patient, very careful, setting up exactly this situation. David rose and nodded slightly, confirmation that I was on the right track. The art recovery people didn't just find this storage unit by accident. I continued. They've been tracking Harold's network for 2 years, watching transactions, identifying stolen pieces, building cases against everyone involved. And Catherine, your clients didn't just recently decide they wanted Harold silenced. They'd been planning this for months. Your point? Catherine asked, her hand still hovering near her purse. My point is that everyone in this room except Rebecca has been playing a longer game than they're admitting. Harold's been using my identity to hide assets while planning one final score. The art recovery people have been using Harold as bait to identify his entire network. And your clients have been waiting for the perfect moment to eliminate loose ends. I pulled out the wine bottle, still in its elegant wooden box. But someone else has been playing the longest game of all. Someone who knew Harold would recognize expensive wine, who knew he'd investigate its source, who knew he'd eventually be curious enough to involve the family members whose identities he'd been stealing. Harold's eyes locked onto the bottle with the same intensity I'd seen that first morning. Who sent it, Franklin? Someone who wanted to force this confrontation. Someone who knew that bringing everyone together in one place was the only way to end the cycle of theft, violence, and revenge that's been building for 2 years. I looked directly at David Rosen. Someone who's been planning this moment since they first identified Harold as a target. David stepped forward, his expression grave but determined. My grandmother didn't just lose 14 paintings when the Nazis seized her gallery. She lost her life trying to protect them. She died in Auschwitz because she refused to tell them where she'd hidden her most valuable pieces. David, I said quietly, you didn't just inherit her collection. You inherited her fight. The wine bottle wasn't sent by unknown enemies, Harold. It was sent by the grandson of one of your victims. David's been orchestrating this entire confrontation, using everyone's greed and fear to bring all the players together in one place. Harold's face went white. You've been planning to kill me. Not kill you, David corrected. Expose you. Every person in this storage unit represents a different piece of the art theft network that's been operating for decades. Harold the facilitator, Catherine the enforcer, the stolen artwork as evidence, and the family members whose identities have been compromised by association. Catherine's hand moved toward her purse, but Jerry was faster. In one smooth motion, he had her disarmed and secured, her expensive composure cracking like ice in spring. Federal agents are already surrounding the building, David continued. They've been waiting for my signal, a signal I'll give once everyone has had a chance to understand their options. What options? Rebecca asked, her voice small and frightened. Cooperation or prosecution? Your father can provide information about his entire network, clients, suppliers, financial arrangements, stolen pieces still in circulation. In exchange, he gets a reduced sentence and protection from the people who want him dead. And if I refuse? Harold asked. Then you face federal charges, state charges, and civil suits from victim families. You'll spend whatever years you have left in prison, and Rebecca will spend the rest of her life knowing that her father chose greed over her child's future. Michael moved to Rebecca's side, taking her hand. Becca, this is our chance to end this. To start over with a clean slate, to raise our child without looking over our shoulders. Rebecca looked between her father and her husband, torn between competing loyalties. Dad, what do you want me to do? Harold studied the storage unit full of stolen art, the evidence of a lifetime spent profiting from other people's suffering. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of defeat and, perhaps, relief. I want you to choose your husband, Princess. Choose your child. Choose the life you can build together instead of the life you'd have to run from. Tears streamed down Rebecca's face as she pressed closer to Michael. Are you sure? I'm sure. For the first time in 20 years, I'm completely sure. David Rosen pulled out his phone and sent a brief text. Within minutes, federal agents were flooding into the storage unit, securing the scene, cataloging evidence, beginning the long process of returning stolen art to its rightful owners or their heirs. Harold submitted to arrest with dignity, his hands cuffed behind his back, his expensive clothes wrinkled but his spine straight. As they led him away, He looked back at Rebecca one final time. "Take care of my grandchild," he said. "And tell them their grandfather wasn't a complete monster." Catherine Volkov was led away in separate custody, her client's plans for permanent solutions permanently derailed by federal intervention. The art recovery team began the delicate process of documenting each piece, photographing provenance marks, preparing cases that would restore stolen masterpieces to families who'd waited decades for justice. And I stood in the middle of it all, holding the wine bottle that had started this cascade of revelations, thinking about the strange ways that justice sometimes works in the world.